This video is sponsored by Babbel, but more on that later. Hello and welcome to Broadsword Wargaming. I'm your host Oliver, and today I'll be joined by Kira as we embark on a journey to find the best and/or easiest ways to paint Space Marines. Now, when it comes to Marines, the possibilities are endless. From timeless colour schemes to innovative personal touches, whether you find solace in the slap chop technique, the finesse of airbrushing, the magic of contrast paints, or the tried and true battle-ready or parade-ready methods, rest assured, we are going to try them all and look at the various techniques involved. For the sake of maintaining fairness, we'll focus on the poster boys, the renowned Ultramarines, although I must admit I'm an Imperial Fist man. However, the techniques and concepts we explore are applicable to all Space Marine chapters, as well as all other miniatures in general. We will also stick to using Citadel paints, just because they're widely available and easy to colour match. You can mix and match whichever elements you like from whichever techniques you find easy or enjoyable. Some are a little more complex, but all are achievable with a little practice and some know-how. So with our test subjects neatly arranged, let's get to it. First up, it's the Grimdark style. I used a Macragge blue spray can to cover this model from the start. You can of course spray it black and then paint it blue. I just think the Macragge blue gives you a really nice even coat. Then I covered up some details, so I used Black Legion contrast on the gun and Lead Belcher for the metals. These cover really nicely. It's a dead simple start. It takes about 5 minutes to do this. Then it's Retributor armor, the base color for the golds. Again, really nice coverage, easy to use, and most people have access to this. Cover up the rest of the details on this model is a couple of pouches I used Mournfang for. The tassels was Zandri Dust and Mephiston Red for the seal itself. With all of the details base covered, it's onto the magic sauce, the AK Interactive Streak and Grime. This is where this whole scheme comes together. Cover the entire model in this, straight out of the pot. Do remember this is an enamel wash, so it does not mix with water, and the brush you are using will get absolutely wrecked. So use an old cheap brush and just cover the whole thing. That's as easy as this is. The whole model at the end should look a little bit like the person from James Bond that's covered in oil. It looks a bit ridiculous, but I actually left this to set for about 15 minutes. If you leave it too long, it gets harder to remove. I grabbed a makeup sponge, you can also use Q-tips, and I covered the end in an odorless thinner. I used Sansador just to remove the excess. And what you're doing here is removing it bit by bit and leave it in all of the recesses and any of the areas you wish to look grimy. If you take too much away, you can always add it back on. But that is how this model looks once it's dried. There are no additional highlights on this one, so you could do that to make it look even better. But honestly, excluding drying time, this takes about 5 minutes to do a full model. So if I'm doing an army, a great way to get going. This next method I'm going to call the Airbrush All-In. Thank you so much to my brother Ben for sending over the colours and the recipes, because I think this one looks great. Now we started from a Chaos Black base, and then we are using white through the airbrush to give you a nice zenithal. The idea here is to pinpoint the highlights and really make those parts of the models pop. You're trying to leave as much dark as you can in the recesses, whilst also giving the model some nice contrast. It's time for the colour, and for this we are using Macragge Blue. Now I have thinned this to an almost wash consistency, and I gave it about 3 coats all over. Of course you could stop at any point you like if you like the colour, but you really do want a nice base colour set in on the model, because that's where you're going to work up from later. As you can see, the lower ends of the shoulder pads, the back end of the butt, the bottom end of the backpack are all darker. Then we're coming in with Calgar Blue. This is straight Calgar Blue, thinned again a little bit, and we're focusing now on a smaller area. So you're looking at a smaller part of where you did the zenithal. So that's kind of the top of the head, the top strip of the backpack, the 2 pinpoints on the shoulder pads, the front of the knees, and the backs of the legs. And we're going to again go in with an even lighter colour. So next it is Calgar Blue mixed with Fenrisian Grey. And here we're doing the same, but an even finer point. Now this is probably the part that's the most difficult, only because it requires you to be quite accurate when you're using the airbrush. Of course, anything you could do, you can always fix by adding the other colour back in again. With the highlights finished, let's start looking at the shadows. If you focus on the hand and the gun here, you can see I'm spraying in a darker blue. I'm using Drakenhof Nightshade into the recesses just to tint the kind of black darker areas with a bit more interest and a bit more colour. Then it's on to a really fun step, and this is using a sponge to sort of highlight and weather the model. I've got pure Fenrisian Grey, and I'm stabbing this over anywhere I want there to be some battle damage, particularly on elements where you feel there would be more damage to the backs of the legs, the tops of shoulder pads, and any other tips like on the head. Then it's in with a paintbrush, same color. I'm using this side of the brush to highlight everything and then pulling it away, like we do here, to give you some sort of better scratched battle damage effects. I have to say, I really love that way of highlighting. It's quick, it's easier, and it requires kind of less accuracy, so it's quite fun as well. Then it's just black in to finishing up the base colors. I'm using Retributor Armor here on the gold trims, Leadbelcher on the guns, Mephiston on the red, and just block in any other colors with the colors you like. Before we get to the magic step of this one, I'm going to use some gloss varnish. I'm covering the whole model in 1 or 2 coats of gloss to give it a really nice finish, so then when we apply the oils, which is what we're doing next, they'll flow even better. I'm using Winsor & Newton Black and then the Winsor & Newton Samsodor Odorless Thinner. Mixing this up on a little metal pot, this is actually the top end of a Coke can, and I'm mixing this to a wash-like consistency. Now I did struggle and do struggle generally using oils to get it to the right consistency. As you see, 1 tap and it should spread all over the model. Here, I think it was slightly too thick. There are some pre-mixed oils around which I may be interested in trying out in the future. But I left this about 24 hours, cleaned up a few bits with just the thinner, and this is the finish of the model. It's absolutely gorgeous. I love it. I can't wait to do more models in this way. I think you should really give it a go because it's fun. Have you ever found yourself in an embarrassing situation because of a language misunderstanding? Well, Babbel is the ultimate language learning app that can teach you to speak, read, and listen in new languages. With lessons, games, podcasts, videos, and even live online classes with expert teachers, you'll have everything you need to become fluent or simply learn a few phrases for your next vacation. What sets Babbel apart is that it's scientifically proven to help you start speaking a new language in just 3 weeks. And the lessons? They're designed by real language teachers who know exactly what you need to succeed. Babbel offers a 20-day money-back guarantee, so you can try it risk-free. Plus, with your subscription, you'll get 2 live free classes to take your learning to the next level. To get Babbel today, just click the link below, and when you use my special link, you'll get an incredible 60% off. That's right, 60% off. So don't miss out on this amazing opportunity to start learning a new language today. Right, let's get back to the video.
Okay, we're going to go for the Games Workshop Classic Beginner-Friendly, air quotes, beginner-friendly Games Workshop method of painting a Space Marine. We sprayed it all over with Macragge Blue to get a nice even blue coat, and then we're going over that with a nice heavy wash of Nuln Oil. Use your brush to make sure it doesn't pool on any of the flat panels, or else you will have something that looks like this, a big splodge on the side. Don't let that happen. Use your brush to wipe it away. That's not what we want. Now we're going to edge highlight every single edge that we can find on this mini, because that's what Games Workshop like to do. They're going to make you work for it, because edge highlighting isn't easy. It's not an easy technique to get right. But you're going to use this first lighter color in a thicker edge highlight all over like this, and then we're going to take an even lighter color. We're going to use Fenrisian Grey. I think the last one was Calgar Blue, and use that Fenrisian Grey to go all over those edge highlights again, but thinner than the first time. Once you've done 2 edge highlights on every single edge on the mini, this is what it looks like. I'm just going to fill in all the extra little details so you can see what it looks like. Here is the finished look. With a lot of practice, this can look really, really nice. It's a simple technique, and if you like that heavy highlighted, almost heavy metal style, this could be the method for you. The downside to this being that it is very time consuming. If you have a whole army to do, this is going to slow you down big time.
It's slap chop. Now, this is a technique that's been around on the internet for this last 6 months, been a bit of a popular thing, but I've yet to try it. This involves basing the model with Chaos Black and spraying it with a grey Zenithal. Now, I did use Grey Seer because I didn't have any standard Mechanicus Grey, so it is a tiny bit lighter than I'd have liked. Then you take a white and dry brush all over the model. You want to catch all of the edges because we are going to use contrast to lift up everything and sort of automatically highlight the miniature. I am using the Ultramarines contrast paint, thinned down ever so slightly because I think it's actually quite a dark paint on its own. The trick here is not to let it pool in the places you don't want it to pool, and to not get it on the other areas, as we're going to contrast paint everything. So if you splash the blue over something you want yellow on, it's going to be harder to cover that moving forward. You can of course go back and correct it with greys and whites, but it's just going to take a little bit longer. So do be careful, do be relatively accurate, but don't worry about it too much. Then I'm going to paint the gun in with Black Legion contrast, thin down a little bit again. This will allow some of those highlights and the dry brush areas to pop through, so you get that kind of naturally highlighted paint scheme. Already it's looking quite good, to be honest. It hasn't taken me very long. I've just had to be a little bit careful. fill in the rest of the details. I used snakebite leather on the leathery brown pouches. I used an Agrax Earth shade over the tassels. Now you can of course use a darker color if you wish, but I quite liked that sort of natural white paper. I used a red for the seal, and that was the rest of the painting done. I don't have a gold contrast paint or an express paint or anything of those sorts, so this kind of had to be done old school. I used Retributor armor yet again over all of the gold, so that's the gun, the chest plate, and the size of the shoulder pads. And that's pretty much the model done. The only thing left is to wash the golds. I used Guilliman Flesh contrast. This is my ultimate new favorite way to paint golds, and then just added some edge highlights. You can of course skip the edge highlight stages. That is kind of the whole point of the Slapchop scheme. Ultimately, the model looks really cool. I'm not sure it works really well on flat panels because it can end up a bit patchy. This is probably better suited to something with clothes, armor, or skin. But if you enjoy this scheme and it gets your models done, go for it.
Next up, I'm going to show you my absolute favourite way to paint a Space Marine. First, you use 2 rattle cans, a black and a white, to make a heavy zenithal. Rattle cans are super easy to use, super quick, and accessible too. Then I'm going to use Ultramarines Blue contrast paint through an airbrush and give a few nice even coats. The reason this is better than using a brush is because you can put much thinner layers on, which means the zenithal is actually going to do its job and be visible underneath the paint. Once you've got it all on, maybe like 2-3 layers of it, it is going to look a little bit dusty. That's fine. Just pick a nice complementary shade color and put a thin layer all over it. This is going to make the color pop. Don't put on so much that it pools into the recesses, because we're going to pin wash for that instead. I'm going to use Nuln Oil here, but I have used black ink before. You can use anything really, as long as it's a nice dark color. I tried it with Drakenhof too, but the Nuln Oil was just a little bit nicer. Just lightly go around any creases that you want to put a little shadow into and make the panels separate and give it a bit more dimension. Next, put on your first highlight. I like to use a highlight color that's not too dissimilar from the base coat. So this is, I think it's Calgar Blue mixed with Macragge Blue. So it's barely noticeable, but it is doing its job. And it means if you put it on too thick, it doesn't really matter. Then we get our lighter highlight. This is, again, I just lightened up that first mix, so this is a little custom shade. It's not too much different from the shade before it, but I'm selectively placing the highlights. I'm not going over every single panel because ain't nobody got time for that. So just pick anywhere you think the light would pop and just whack a little highlight on. This saves so much time and in my opinion looks a lot better than edge highlighting every single panel on the whole Marine. You can just see it just looks a little bit more natural than the other ones did. I'm going to fill in all the rest of the bits and you can see what it looks like when it's finished. This is my preferred method of painting Space Marines. I think it looks a lot more natural, it's a little bit easier, and it doesn't have you doing one technique for too long. So if you're like me and you hate batch painting, you're not going to get bored uber quick.
And there we have it, 5 Space Marines, 5 techniques, and 5 very different styles. I think the thing you can take from this video, and certainly the thing I've learned, is that we all have a way we like to paint. So grab any elements you like. For me, it's probably the zenithal with the contrast, the sponge highlighting, and a nice bit of edge highlighting really makes these models pop. Ultimately, what really matters is that you enjoy the whole process, because that is what this is. It's a hobby and we're meant to enjoy it. If you like this video, please do make sure to like, share, subscribe, and hit the alarm bell below for more videos. Check out all the links down below for links to the shop, the Patreon, and the Discords, and hopefully you guys can take something from this. So I'll leave you there and I'll catch you in the next one.